this is Riding with Rhi. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. A little bit of a different scenario for today's video. I've brought you down to the local pub to finally do one of my most requested videos, and that is my horse riding story. So let's sit down, have a chat. Why don't you head to the bar, get yourself a drink, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, whatever you want, and let's get straight into it. So I grew up on a farm in Gloucestershire, big farm, and the person who owned the farm actually had horses when I was really small. So he had these massive hunters in these big Victorian stables. So I would go down and see them, and obviously to me they were these massive creatures. And when I was younger they had a yearly horse trials on the farm as well. And so obviously we would go and walk around for free because we lived there. And I remember this one year I was walking through the kind of woodland complex and I heard over the tannoy, da 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 da, Mary King, blah, blah, blah. And she jumped in front of me over this massive jump and then just carried on through the wood, and I was just like, because at the time she was one of my idols. I say at the time, she definitely still is. So this whole time that we lived on the farm, I was like, can't I just get a pony? They can just live here, da 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 da. And it wasn't gonna happen. And I wasn't actually allowed riding lessons until I think I was 9. I thought I was 12, my mum says I was 9. So I started having riding lessons and just became pretty obsessed with horses. Like at home I had toys, I had barnyards, I had the Pippa Funnel games, if anyone remember those, Take the Reins and the Golden Stirrup Challenge and all of that stuff. But of course lessons are super expensive. And so once I started at Durham's Farm Riding School, the Cotswold Riding School, my mum sort of got a deal going with the owner, Pat, who is amazing and taught me so much. So I would work both days of the weekend, I think it was, and then I would have a lesson each week in exchange. And that was a really great way for me to get my horsey fix. And as I grew older, I learned more and more about the horse care side of things. I led hacks out and showed them around and kind of showed them what the landscape was. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I'd, you know, help out on pony days and teach people about horse care. And I'd run around the ring doing lead rein lessons, which I was really bad at. But yeah, it was a really great way to learn not just the riding side of things, but everything else as well. And I was able to do it because, like I said, my mum had figured out this thing. So as I got older, I started going to pony camp. Pony camp was quite expensive because not only did you have to pay for the 4 days that you and your pony would be away, but you'd also have to borrow a horse, so you'd have to pay for that, and then the transport and everything else. And one of the things that made it cheaper was if your parent were able to come and help do like the breakfast in the morning, the cooked breakfast for the kids. So my poor mum came down every day for a week, got up super early, did these fried breakfasts for all of us kids, and then ran off to work herself, and that made pony camp cheaper. So I did that for a couple of years with Mr. Chips and Bobby V. Mr. Chips is the pony I told you about in a couple of videos back with the whole barge story. If you haven't seen it, you should go and watch it. It's quite something. And there were a couple of years where we just couldn't afford it. I just couldn't go. And I remember my friend Ollie, who I was friends with from when we were at school. We've been friends for like 20 years now, if not more. He surprised me on the first day of pony camp. Everyone had gone off and I was obviously really sad because I couldn't go, and he took me to his grandma's house and she had a pony there, and he had set up a pony camp. And so he was slightly older than me, and he'd started to do his working towards his BHS exams and stuff, so he gave me a lesson every day, and kind of made a pony camp for me, which was like the nicest thing ever. And there was another year where a lovely girl who I rode with, Daisy, she had a new horse and she had her old mare Cheeky, and they said I could take Cheeky to camp for free. And it's just one of the it's something I've never forgotten, because it was just such a lovely thing to do, and it made me feel so included with everybody. And so yeah, I think I've been really lucky throughout my whole childhood to have people who helped me get to where I wanted to be with horses and helped me access horses. And I think it hopefully is a myth that we're breaking in the equestrian industry, that you have to be rich to do horses. Like, yes, they are expensive, but there are ways into it. I think particularly in the racing world, they're finding new ways to bring in people, which is amazing. So I got to about 15 years old, 14, 15, and I found a job with Ollie at a hunt yard. So this was a really different, really switched way of thinking and riding and working. And it was on this hill, so you had a bottom row of stables, a middle row of stables, and then a top row of stables kind of on this like step like yard. And so because I was like bottom in the pecking order, I had the bottom set of stables, so you had to push this barrow every morning up, all the way up this hill to get to the muck heap. So it was really hard work. You know, in the winter you'd start out with super early mornings, and then by the time you got into proper winter when it was freezing and cold and muddy, you'd be sending the horses off, and then you'd be there until like 7-8 p.m. when the horses came back, washing them off. And it was great. I learned so much about not just this whole other side of the equestrian industry and a different sort of side to the sport, but also about what it meant to ride really fit horses and fit hunters, and what it meant to get horses fit, starting to learn in that way. And you know, Ollie gave me lessons, and I got to ride loads of different types of horses, and I think it really helped my riding. So I parallel pathed that with Otto, who is a pony that Ollie helped me find, that he was owned by this old couple who had bought him, and he was a little bit of a handful for them. He was quite nappy and he reared a lot, and we got on really well. I think he was a Connemara cross, and he was an amazing little jumper, but he was very nappy. And the first time I tried to take him out hacking, I think it took me like 2 hours to get out of the gate because he just didn't want to move. And so my mum again would come with me on a bicycle, and she would ride in front and I'd ride behind, and eventually we got to a point where she kind of rode side by side, and then one day she slipped behind him and disappeared, and then I rode out on my own. And that was how I got my first phone, actually, as a 15-year-old, because my parents wanted me to have a phone that I could call them on if, you know, I got in trouble or anything happened with Otto. And he became known, I think, locally as this little pony who reared, so you had to give him extra space and everything else. But yeah, he was a lovely pony, and again, he taught me so much about patience and try again, and to keep going. And it was the first experience I had of owning my own horse, but without any of that financial commitment. So I looked after him, I mucked him out and everything, and I think I paid for his shoes with my money that I had from my job, but I wasn't having the huge financial commitment that you would normally get with a pony. And to be honest, at the time, it wasn't even something that occurred to me at that age. I do remember one Christmas morning, it was completely dead, and we rode Otto through Morsden Marsh, if you've ever been there. It was completely empty. And there was a big business nearby that had this massive field, and they let me ride on it on Christmas Day, which felt like such a naughty treat because it was essentially a football field. So that was really exciting. And so this all parallel path with my GCSEs and then my A-levels. And I told you before that that hunt yard was on top of a big hill, and there was one winter where it was super icy, and you couldn't get up to the top of this hill because it was so icy. And so I was supposed to go home, and I had like an essay deadline or something, and I had to ask my boss if I could use their house to finish my essay and send it off because I couldn't get home. So that was very cool. It was a really nice meshing of the two worlds. And actually, by the time I got to the end of my A-levels, I got into, actually no, that's a lie, I'd got 2 offers from university to go and do English literature, but I really wanted to do this. I really wanted to be a groom, and I said to my parents, like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to go to uni, actually. And so they said, okay, well, you've got the offer now, so why don't you go to uni, and then when you're done, if you still want to be a groom, then you can do that. And I was like, okay, that seems fair. So I went off to uni in Surrey, and the first week I was there, I made a CV out of all the work I'd done at the riding school and the hunt yard, and I went around these local yards and handed in my CV and was like looking for work. And because I was doing English literature, I had a lot of reading hours, so I could be quite flexible in my days and my timetable. And so I went to this one yard, I met the owner, and then I met who would become my boss, Nicola, and I started working at this kind of part livery yard. So it was pretty like, people would buy muck outs or turnouts or bring-ins depending on their schedules. So every time I worked, Nick would give me a list and be like, okay, you've got 6 to muck out, 3 to turn out, 3 to bring in, whatever. And whilst I was there, I started riding a horse called Ben and a couple of other horses for the liveries. There was an ex-race horse, I think he was an ex-race horse, called Breeze, and a little pony called Magic, and we were right on Windsor Great Park. So I spent like so long riding on Windsor Great Park and schooled a little bit, but it wasn't really like a schooling yard. So did that for a while. And then I can't remember exactly why, but I had to stop riding Ben. I don't know if he went on loan to, like officially on loan to someone. And Ben's owner said, okay, well, I do have another horse, but I don't know if you want to ride him, like he's not very nice. And that was Storm. Storm was about 15-2, gorgeous like chestnut horse with a flaxen mane, like super stunning. Very naughty indeed. Didn't like jumping, was beautifully schooled, but was a bit of a nightmare. Like he was a little bit naughty, and we got on like a house on fire. So I tried to storm out, and I remember the first day I went to hack him out on my own, and Nick was like, "You're crazy, like he's broken my arm, he's broken my sister's arm, like why are you out with this horse?" And actually I only ever fell off him once, I think, and that was, we were up in Windsor Great Park, we were trotting along this path, and all these cyclists came down, and he just spun around and caught me off guard. I got straight back on and we carried on. But I always think back to that time because I'm like, God, that would have made a great YouTube channel, wouldn't it? Why? I didn't even think. The crazy thing is I had other blogs at the time. I had a fashion one, and then later on I had one about coffee, and it never occurred to me to talk about the thing that I really love. It was always something that was just omnipresent. So I did this all the way through uni, and actually I think it was one of the things that kept me going. You know, I tried out for the school riding team, hated it. It was really expensive. I went to my first competition, it was all the way across London. I had to go on the trains and everything and all my outfits, and then I got on a horse I'd never sat on before, 5 minutes before a competition, and then had to compete against people who had had their horses for years, and I just hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I tried out with polo, didn't really enjoy that, it was also really expensive, and so this little yard job that I had alongside the jobs I had in pubs and stuff was just like a really nice oasis. So I finished uni 3 years later, and when I was 20, turning 21, I moved to London for work, and my parents had given me like a 6-month window where they were like, okay, we're going to help with your rent until this date, and if you can't find a job by then, like you come home, we regroup, it's all fine, which I thought was really fair. So when I first moved to London, obviously I was a bit like up in the air, big city, didn't know where I was, and I put an advert out for a share with all my experience and horses to ride, and didn't find anything. And it kind of went on the back burner. You know, I got a job at Selfridges as a social media assistant, and I was doing my coffee blogging and other stuff, and every time I went home I rode with Ollie, so I rode the hunters he was looking after and went jumping, and I'd occasionally do horse catching at the local point to point, and I would still go to some of the hunt balls, but it wasn't something that I thought about as much. And I think a lot of riders go through this where they have a moment, usually when they're a teenager, where they kind of either break from riding and then they never come back to it, or they break and they come back to it as an adult, or they keep going through and through and they really get competitive and whatever. And so for me, this break happened when I was like 21, and it was literally a 5-year gap where I rode every time I went home, and I loved it, don't get me wrong, and I had occasional lessons, but it was like kind of something I put to the back of my mind. And I tried lots of other things, writing, swimming, art, like loads of other things that fit more with my London lifestyle. But it was, I think it was Christmas 2019 or 2018, can't remember exactly. We went out to New Zealand and we were riding while we were out there, and I don't know what it was about that, because I'd ridden this whole time, just not as much. But when I got back home, we obviously were at home for Christmas and New Year, and we weren't doing very much, and so this is where it gets embarrassing. I downloaded this app called Rival Horse Racing or something. You'll know what it is, you've probably seen an advert for it. Horse Racing Stars, I'll find a picture anyway and put it up. And I got quite like obsessed with this app of just like being around the horses again. And I don't know whether it was like a trigger from playing the PIVO funnel games from when I was younger or whatever, but I got really into it, and I got into it and I was like, okay, I just really need to ride horses again. So I put out information looking for a share again, and of course the rest is history. You know, I started sharing a bit more and people were really interested in asking lots of questions, so I created a whole account dedicated to that side of things. And then I guess a year later, in March of this year, I found Woody, and I mean, you guys know the rest, it's sort of all gone from there. But I think the through line through all of this has been people giving me a chance, and I think there's always someone who's willing to let you ride their horses, provided that you're willing to put in the hard work. And I've worked at so many yards, I'm sure I'm missing so many stories and whatever, and I'm happy to do another video with like stories, specific stories. But you know, I think it also makes me really appreciate now my career and having Woody on full livery, I think and I hope I can be a good livery, because I understand what it's like to be on the other side and just be trying to get your job done and trying to do a good job for the liveries that you're looking after. I think it's also fine to come to owning late in your life and to have not done it, and actually I'm glad it happened now. I think if I look back at all the horses that I've had, I'm like, would I have bought any of them? And I just keep thinking, well, you'd have outgrown them, or you'd have struggled with money in this period, or you wouldn't have been able to do X, and now it feels like this was actually the right time to do it. And equally, I think you can have these memories you hold on to when you're younger of like jumping this and jumping that, and it can feel really disheartening when you come back to it as an adult, because you feel like you're not doing as good of a job. And actually that's fine too. Like sometimes you have to be humble enough to be like, okay, I've forgotten how to do X and Y and I'm gonna reset, and that's fine. And that's sort of the journey that I'm on now, and I know it's resonating because so many of you are here, and so I'll keep sharing. But that's my horse riding story. I think it's more common than people think. Not everybody grows up with horses of their own. And so yeah, hope that you've enjoyed this week's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, leave me any questions or comments below, and I will see you next week, 4 PM GMT. Bye for now.